All right, we're going to start our final session here. Kind of going backwards. We did enology, now we're doing viticulture.
Yeah, there you go.
We did marketing, so we really went backwards. You got to do that, and then that, then that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, there you go. Rolling and tape backwards. Yeah.
Okay. You know, I just kind of noticed we're kind of going a little bit backwards with our speakers today. We're rolling back time. We're going to go into our viticulture session here, and we just finished up with enology, and we had marketing before that, so we're rolling back the hands of the process here. Going into viticulture here, our next presenter, he began farming in the early 70s, and in 2001 was his inaugural wine release under his own label. He released his first Petite Sirah in 2003, and in 2006 the release of Epicenter, Old Vine Zinfandel. And from the Mettler family Vineyards, please welcome Larry Mettler.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me all right back there? I'll raise this up a little bit. Better? Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to be here today, and it's a pleasure to talk about the most fun part of this business. That's the raising of the grapes. I mean, the marketing and the winemaking has its challenges, and so does the raising of the grapes, but for us and for me, this is the most fun part, to get out in the fields and be involved with that part of it. Well, just a little history just as we get going here, so you have a little bit better idea where I'm coming from. And my presentation is Mettler family's been operating in Lodi since 1899 on the same property. And the vineyards that you'll see in some of these pictures today, particularly the Petite Sirah, the organically farmed Petite Sirah, is on that same soil. The family came to California from South Dakota before they knew global warming was coming. And I'm thankful that they did leave. We are farming about 800 acres of wine grapes. Of that, half of it is management property. The other half we either own or lease. And out of that, 50 acres are Petite Sirah. And 30 acres are in our organic farming program. This picture shows a young vineyard being planted in 2007. I'm going to talk a little bit about rootstocks here. Because these soils have been farmed for a number of years, in some cases they're second and third generation vineyards. I can remember this ground having cherries on it, peaches, at least 2 vineyards, alfalfa, and I didn't think I was that old, but I can remember those things. So here we're using 03916 rootstock, and another shot I'm going to be showing you RS3, which are 2 of the rootstocks that we've had to go to because of the existence of fan leaf virus in our soils with our nematode problem. In this particular case, we're going to a closer spacing, an 8x8, and we're using the fence post type stake for our trellising. And you can see the compost being spread there. This picture here shows the same vineyard, only this spring. It was a picture taken this spring. This is the RS3 rootstock, and it shows the 2 vertical wires that are in place. This is a vertical shoot positioned trained vineyard with 2 sets of lift wires. This is another shot of an older vineyard. This vineyard was planted in 2002 using the 03916 rootstock. The spacing is also close spacing. We think it's a little too close for us. This is 7 feet between vines in 8-foot rows. It's a little bit too strong for that 7 foot, so that's why the next planting we went to 8. This shows a little bit different type of trellising, although it's still a VSP. It shows the use of a notched roll form stake that allows the lift wires to be put at any height that you want. And in between the notch stake, there'll be 2 short stakes, and we're just using a piece of standard steel rebar that you'd use in any kind of cement work. That really lowers the cost, and it seems to be very adequate. It also shows 5 or 6 spurs per side. And in this particular shot, the weak shoots have been suckered out already this spring, leaving just 2 shoots per spur. This shows a young vine with the cordon extension being laid down on the wire. It seems like the first year or the second year actually, when the vine is growing up and grows out on the wire, we will still cut that cordon back in order to form the first 2 or 3 spurs, and then the following year we'll lay down the extension to complete the cordon, which would be the 3rd or 4th summer, depending on how well the vine performs. This is just another shot of the same. This picture here shows again the field planted in 2002 in early spring growth. It shows some weed growth in the middle. This vineyard has been dished 1 time, and it also has had an in-row cultivation done 1 time. One of the challenges with organic farming, of course, is weed control. It's not a hard thing to take care of, you just have to do it, and it's quite a bit more costly, and timing is a little more of a factor. So we use a Kimco. This is a shot later in the year, but we use this piece of equipment. It seemed to work pretty well for us. I have used other pieces of equipment, plows, hydraulic plows, and other types of things over the years, and I really like this piece of equipment. It's pretty forgiving. The guys don't eat up too many grapevines when they're using it. Occasionally that happens, or they might bend a stake, but it's pretty minimal, and we're pretty happy with that. We have to go through at least twice with this machine during a 12-month period, sometimes 3 times. And we've also then, in our shop, we've built it's like a levee disc, but it throws the dirt back. So once that's kind of dished out away from the vine, if we get weed growth from irrigation or whatever, then we'll come through with that kind of a levee plow disc and throw dirt back to cover the weeds. And that seems to take us for another month or 6 weeks at least before we have any weed growth issues. This picture shows the 2002 planting. Of course, it's this year's pictures. Looking east, it shows the first lift wire that has been raised on the north side of the vine row. So when you're looking at that picture, the vine row on the right, you'll see how nice those shoots are vertically positioned. And the row on the left, you'll see the shoots basically hanging, about half mast down. That is because that wire has not been lifted. What we've found on the true vertical trellis systems, there's a little too much exposure in our area for that to the sun, so we're modifying that a little bit. We are not lifting that south wire, but we're lifting the north wire, so we're able to get to the fruit for all of the things that we're doing, whether it's leaf pulling or thinning or whatever we're doing. It allows us to get to that fruit. So I'll go to the next picture. Now this is the same row as an up-close shot. It shows the north side of the cordon. And then this next shot is another close-up showing the south side of the cordon. So there definitely is a difference. We feel that this gives us enough mottled light through on the clusters, and it doesn't overexpose the fruit on that side of the cordon. This is, again, the same field, but a little bit later on. Hedging has been done on that side that the shoots were hanging down. A low hedging is done in order to allow us to get under the vine for cultivation, also for more air movement, and so we really like this method. It makes the vineyard look good, and it doesn't, when you're going through for any type of spray programs, your tractor tires aren't driving on those shoots and breaking shoots off, and it's working out well. This shows some fruit on another picture. I'm going to go past that one. This is the same field after light leaf removal. This is on that same vineyard, the close spacing vineyard that I showed you earlier. Now this, I'm going to jump away from that close spacing vineyard and go to another vineyard that we're farming. This particular vineyard, and I might just say at this point that it seems like whatever region you go into, there's 1,500 different trellis shapes and vine spacings. So we're not exempt from that. We seem like we have everything that over the years, rootstocks come and go and trellising systems become popular and they come in and they go out and whatever. And we're still striving for the ultimate. And I'm not so sure there always is an ultimate. It depends on your site, your rootstock, and so many other issues. But in this particular case, this vineyard is planted 8 by 12 foot spacings. It's using a 5BB rootstock. It's at least a second generation vineyard because I know I planted the first one also. And it's a north-south row spacing, which is something that I don't really like. But because of the way the field was laid out and some other issues, we were forced to go to a north-south spacing. It hasn't worked out too bad because it has a T-trellis, which is a 24-inch cross arm on the top. Also in this field, we're using non-cultivation every other row, which slows the vine down a little bit in the springtime. It devigorates a little bit. We want to devigorate it a little bit without over devigorating, which we can also do with permanent cover crops and we have in some other fields. But for this particular vineyard and this particular winery, this is working out pretty well. It also reduces our dust. In our part of San Joaquin County, we're under and the rest of you probably too, to some degree at least, the Air Pollution Control Board is pretty heavy on us for a lot of things, and it's not just diesel motors and that, it's dust in the fields. We have to actually do a dust plan that includes a lot of things, and I'm not going to go into all that right now. It gets my hair up. It's probably good, but it still is a lot of, it seems like a lot of things that don't make a lot of sense. But anyhow, so we have this vineyard. It's also on drip irrigation. Let's see, I told you it's 5BB rootstock. Let's move on here. This is the same vineyard. It shows a big crop. It has a wind foliage wire about 12 to 14 inches above the cordon. Because it's north-south spacing, our winds come from predominantly from the west or the northwest. And so that foliage catch wire is pretty important on a north-south planting. And then the cross arm is above that another 12 or 14 inches. This is a pretty vigorous site. It shows a crop load here in this picture after leaf removal. Earlier in the spring, this vineyard did have the weak shoots removed, and it still has what we consider way too much fruit. So we do this. Yes, we growers actually do this. After leaf removal, cluster thinning is done, and it's done for all the normal reasons. I mean, we all talked about the quality reasons and so on and so forth. You do get crop reduction and what have you with shoot removal, but in a real vigorous site, and particularly with Petite Sirah Young Vineyard and also with Zinfandel and some others, you can get way too much fruit when these vines are young. They have to settle down. So we're taking a little fruit off there. Just another shot now of the same vineyard again. After that cluster removal, I think you can agree with me that we still have a lot of leaves. It's open. It has plenty of leaves to mature the crop. We have sunlight, but not too much. We have crop, but not too much. This particular vineyard is not being grown for any specific brand. And therefore, what we're trying to accomplish is really good quality fruit with 26 bricks, but we're allowed to reach 7 tons to the acre. So we're trying to achieve that for this particular owner, and we are having some success with that. This picture, of course, like I stated, is after cluster thinning. And again, it shows you the foliage wind wire and the T cross arm pretty well in this particular shot. This is the same field. I think that this field will have to have another pass through it with a hand crew to do some color thinning. Possibly some second crop removal, or maybe even some rot removal. Petite Sirah is one of our favorite grapes to raise. Tongue-in-cheek, it's a tough one. You guys all know that. It's tough to raise. It is rot potential like our Zinfandels, but with the right care and the right trellising and that, we can overcome a lot of those issues. This is another ranch again. This particular field is being irrigated with subsurface irrigation. I was trying to get a really good picture of that, where you'll know a lot of times that those of you that use it, water will sub up to the surface. But at this particular time when I was taking the picture, I really couldn't get that. But you see no drip hoses in there because it's subsurface. I would say that this vineyard right here probably is pretty standard for trellising and vineyards in our area. It's 8 by 10 foot spacing. It's on has a 24-inch cross arm. It's planted east-west. It has a rootstock that is somewhat vigorous by some standards maybe, but we're kind of need to go to some of those rootstocks where we have the nematode pressure and some of the other issues in the soils that we have. These vineyards are normally all shoot suckered and leaf removed, and some cluster thinning is done, particularly based on what the winery requirements might be. Like I was telling you a minute ago, we grow for a lot of different wineries, and they all have some different requirements, and so whatever they require, then we try to accommodate. This is another shot of another type of tea trellis. You may have seen these in your area, I'm not sure. I call these rabbit ears. And it's no really different from a standard tea trellis, except that it gives you some extra lift on above your stake for your foliage to go in between. It allows you to use a shorter stake as your supporting stake for the vine. And there's different degrees of angle and width and all that you can order these stakes in. And it's just another alternative or another way that a grower can do that. So this just shows the same field after leaf removal, and this shows the grapes up close. So in closing, I would say that if you do everything right, you might get lucky and be able to produce a nice bottle of wine, and when you're all done. And I hope you get a chance later on to try the Mettler Petite Sirah.
Thank you, Larry. I think for time's sake, what I'd like to do is, if we can hold questions till the end of the segment. We have 2 more speakers. We want to make sure we get them all in, and then we can address any viticulture questions all at once. Our next presenter has been a winemaker at Parducci since 1997, and where he instituted an ultra-premium winemaking regime. Bob is not only the winemaker, he also oversees the planting, the farming, and the harvesting of Parducci's estate vineyards, and manages relationships with his own outside growers. From the Mendocino Wine Company, please welcome Bob Swain.
Hello. I don't have my pictures to put up. Don't have time, I guess, to come up with a slideshow. At Parducci, we have 90 acres of estate vineyards at the winery. 45 of them is Petite Sirah, so we are pretty much invested in that variety. I'm also purchasing from a number of growers in the county, so I'm into a good number of different vineyards. Our issues in Mendocino typically we are a late area, and we are probably one of the first areas to get rains. So if you put the two together, it tends to be can be an issue. So on vines, there's been kind of a transition in the 12 years I've been up there. When I first got up there, most of the Petite Sirah was head-pruned, older vineyards, tended to have a lot of virus, so we got the delight of having late vineyards that weren't ripe, which tends to be a little difficulty with quality. Since that time, most of the vineyards, there's a lot of vineyards been replanted, so the majority of the fruit in the valley actually is more in the 8 to 10-year-old vines instead of being the 35, 40-year-old vines that were there before. There are some older blocks that still make some really interesting wine up there. They're typically, all those are head pruned. They tend to be not the virus vineyards, though. We tore out a block at the winery, our last old head prune vineyard, 3 years ago. And we're replanting it, and we're actually replanting it on a wire. The last 2 years that we made wine off of it, we actually separated the vineyard out between vines that showed evidence of virus and our few healthy green-looking vines, and it ended up being about 10% green and 90% virus, and the quality of the wine was dramatically different. It was, we kept on saying we wanted to keep the old block in, but the reality was the virus was not worth keeping. As you saw on his slides, so a lot of these young vineyards tend to have big crop loads up there. So the big key that we have is dropping fruit and thinning. First doing a green thinning. I've got a couple blocks that we've actually are going through the second time already right now. For some reason, the guys who pick the grapes don't like to drop fruit on the ground because they know they're coming back to it later. The other thing we're doing in the thinning too is we're kind of focusing a little bit on the, I don't know what the right term for it, but the booted fruit, where you get the, where the clusters actually split out at the end and you get the shoots that break apart. And those areas used tend to be the more tighter bunches and everything, and so later those we have found more rot in those areas later when we get to harvest if we haven't removed those. And I don't know if anybody else has seen it, but the last 2 years it seemed to be accelerated. There's been more of that, and I don't know if it's virus related or not that it does that splitting. That's another question. For the other issue that we have up there is heat. We don't have a lot of fog, which is a good thing, but what we do have is if we have really extreme heat spikes, just like Lodi or whatever, is we have to keep enough canopy on the vines so that we don't end up just frying the fruit off, which I have seen in a couple of vintages where I've actually had one block where I lost half my fruit in one day. So that's the other, so it's a combination of needing exposure because the rain's late, so for the rotting issue, and then also needing to still keep enough leaves on that you don't have an issue with burning. Flavor-wise, we have a big divergence in flavor between areas in the county. Tend to be on the, we have some vineyards that are on the top of the hills. We have a vineyard, Dark Horse Vineyard, where we'll get more of the big combination of big, more meaty flavors and some peppery, versus some of the vineyards that are more down on the flat, we end up more in the cherry, berry kind of flavors. They're two different profiles that we'll get. And they work together well on blending them or as being separate. Still comes back to the big issue is on picking up there. Because of the difficulty sometimes with the rains, you get the choice of picking on maturity or picking on rot. You know, typically if the vineyards are laid out well, you can withstand 1 or 2 rains up there, but the third seems to be the charm. So I have found myself picking a little bit earlier than I've wanted to sometimes on some vintages. And what I've also seen on a couple of vintages, especially when I had more virus fruit, was actually coming back and adding a little bit of concentrate if they didn't achieve ripeness, that you actually got better flavors by dealing with the issue of non-ripe fruit than with a little more sugar than to just go with what you had. I think that's all I have. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Okay, we're saving the best for last. Our next speaker, he's a fifth-generation viticulturist. He learned from the Demosthene family at Saucel Vineyard. Hope I'm saying that. Okay, thank you. He joined the Fapiano family vineyard in 1999. From Fapiano Vineyards, Mr. Paul Fapiano.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today. Can everybody hear me in the back okay? Very generous of the Concannons to put this event on. As many of you know, we did this at our winery for 6 years, and I think it's come a long way since the first year doing it on the lawn under the umbrellas. There's still a few of the same faces out here, and it's a great organization to be a part of. I learned farming, you know, kind of being raised in it, being a fifth-generation farmer. My grandfather taught me his way, and that was the only way. You sulfured every 10 days, as much as the label would let you put on. You worked the ground until it turned to flour, and when the grapes were ready to pick, when the winemaker wanted to pick them, he turned the water on for 48 hours and picked up a ton to the acre. That we're kind of trying to get away from all the three above a little bit. You know, I've learned some things the hard way, and changing the way that you farm and the way you were raised is a very difficult thing to do. But you need to think outside the box. One of the things we are blessed with in our ranch is we have upper gravelly benchland, which if many of you have been there have seen. Down by the river, it's really deep, sandy loam soils up to 25 feet. They tried Petite Sirah down there in the 70s. You end up with a huge, monstrous, vigorous vine with pink grapes. So we learned not to do that. You get up on the well-drained soils, it does very well. We have some older St. George, some 110R rootstock. The 110R, I've had a lot of trouble getting them established, but after about 10 years, they really seem to have a nice crop balance to canopy. Let's see, where am I at here? Bunch rot's always a problem. Botrytis can be horrible in our area. These guys are don't have the fog issues that I do, but I have fog almost every morning. Yesterday I had it until 1 o'clock, and the high of the day was 71 degrees. Not exactly July weather like I like to see. So our big thing is opening the canopies up early. We like to get in there and pull laterals as soon as we can. The Petite kind of get like Cabernet. The laterals will get very tough, and once you have to start cutting them out with a pair of shears, it gets very expensive very quickly. We'll even do a second leaf pull on a lot of grapes when we go in to do our thinning, which we're doing now. The thinning, I try to do it as early as I can. As you know, the Petite, they usually have the hanger bunch or the hammerhead, as it's been called. And once they get intertwined together, I found that you do more damage for rot later on in the season. Once the fogs come in and get even wetter, closer to harvest, you can really open up a can of worms and have a major problem. So we try to get in there and get that air movement and open them up. Weed control is another thing. I really like to keep underneath the vines clean, not just for looks, but for air movement. With all the fog we have, it's a major issue. One of the other things that I've done that's very difficult for me is to go to every other row cover crop farming. It's been a big step in our program. We're in our 5th year of it now in some blocks, and I'm really starting to reap the benefits of it. Fertilization-wise, we're putting on a lot less minor nutrients. We're finding that the soils are better balanced, and I don't know if that's because the roots are going to new areas to get things or not. And we're having better water infiltration. The other thing is a lot less erosion, and the very best thing is we're using almost no insecticides or miticides anymore. The first year or two we had a little bit of issues, but once we got over that hump, I haven't sprayed for a mite in some of these blocks in well over 5 or 6 years. So I'm very, very happy on that end to be using less chemicals, and I think that's a plus on the environment any way we look at it. I do have a problem with the way the ground looks when it's mowed and it's dry grass. It just reminds me of a hay field, and it just doesn't look as special. I mean, the work ground I think looks pretty neat, but that's something I have to get over. Weed management, since we've controlled that, we've also noticed a lot less water use. We're having a lot more water available to the vines. Extreme weed conditions can use a ton of water, as we can all see. I mean, you can just go back to your garden, and I think on a smaller scale and really see how it does affect things. And so we're finding we're using less irrigation. And I do not irrigate 24 hours before we pick, I can guarantee you that one. And we've cut water back a lot too. We do more frequent but less hours of irrigation. Right now we're on anywhere from 2 to 3 gallons every week to 10 days. We've cut even back farther this year with all the rains. Let's see, where have I not covered here? Leaf pulling. My rows are planted north to south, so I do have some major sun exposure on the western side in the afternoon. When I came back from college, it was, okay, let's plant everything vertical shoot position. Leaf pulling in that trellis system, it's kind of like fertilizer. If a little bit's good, a whole lot's not better. We did that, and in '97 had this huge hot summer, and just anything that was outside the canopy just turned to raisins in 24 hours. We threw 50% of the grapes away. Since then, I no longer have vertical trellis. I have one little piece up by the shop that I use just as an experiment of what not to do on our soils. It's just too darn much exposure where I am in the row direction. On all of our other vineyards, we've gone up with a 12-inch catch wire, and then we use a 12-inch T above that and trying to still get the vertical to keep the spurs nice and straight and keep everything lined, but we're getting a little bit of an umbrella. We completely tuck the morning side. Like Larry was saying, the afternoon side, we almost let go natural after the first tuck. And we're doing really well. We're still getting that filtered light coming in the afternoon. The morning, we open up very well with the leaves pulling by hand. And, we're getting that nice sun exposure to dry the berries off in the morning, and I think that's very important. Avoid fruit stacking in Petite Sirah, as I mentioned earlier. You're just asking for a disaster if you get some late rains once they get soft. There are some things you can do with some products. Elevate seems to work very well late in the season if you do get a little flare-up, but we're trying, like I said, to put on as few chemicals as we can. To touch on chemicals real quick, I've gotten away from using sulfur almost completely. I haven't used wettable sulfur in over 5 years. We mix a dust in once or twice. Usually it's a matter of the spray schedule because of a rain or something, just so we're not beating the ground up with the sprayers. But we're using a lot of oils early, and I'm having very nice luck with oils as far as controlling, once again, the insects and not being hard on the environment. We're using stylet oil basically up till bloom, and I've been pretty happy with it at a ½ gallon per acre. You really don't need to go the heavy rates if you stay on a nice program, 7 to 10 days. The other thing we've done is we've gone to night harvesting on most of our grapes. We started it on Petite Sirah. Since it's our biggest variety as far as tonnage and acres at 45 acres of it, we were finding that we just couldn't get it picked in the amount of time that we needed to get it in before it got overripe. So we went to the night harvesting, and I got to say, the first night I was about ready to walk off the job. It was very interesting. It was what they call a circle jerk. But we ended up going back and reevaluating it that night and got all of our guys on the same page, and as I'm concerned, it's the best time to pick grapes. We're using the towable light system with the 4 big lights, and once the crew figured it out how it worked and they understood it and they understand to work in the light and work together with it, we're starting it anywhere from 11 o'clock at night till midnight, depending on the heat of the day before. You got to let it takes a little while for the fruit temperature to cool down, and we usually quit between 7 and 8 in the morning, depending on the day. And last year we did not bring a berry in over 50 degrees to the winery. And I think oxidation, I think that's a very big thing. I'm not going to get into that one.